Hey, welcome back, guys. Episode 6 of Snowfall's final season was every bit as tragic as promised. An integral pillar of the series is now dearly departed, leaving nothing but despair in the final 4 episodes to come. I'm here to break it all down in typical top 10 WTF fashion. Before we begin, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and bell notification to immediately receive these videos. Also, big thank you to all of my channel donors. If you'd like to be the next one, drop $1 on that Cash App for us. And lastly, a spoiler alert is now in effect for all things Snowfall. Here we go. WTF moment number 10, exit stage loyalty. As previously predicted, Cassandra does indeed attempt to veer Veronique away from Franklin, fearing the worst for her daughter and grandchild's safety in the aftermath of Franklin's blow against Teddy. During the plea, she also reveals that she's made preemptive plans to flee. Veronique refutes her mother's efforts, and upon Franklin's return, reasserts her loyalty to Saint and is planned to get back on top. As suspicious as her mother has come off during her time on the series thus far, in this case, she was actually right, because what's to come is much more dangerous than what's been. WTF moment number 9, a fight for freedom. Jerome crashes back home, literally, still drunk from his depression-filled day. Upon seeing his wife, he makes his intentions on leaving the game for good clearer than ever before. Then, he hurls a series of truth bullets at his muse, the type of realities that only brown liquor could inspire without frontal lobe interference, including his treasons for staying in the game and Louie's insatiable thirst for more. This would end up being one of their final conversations before his inevitable conclusion. WTF moment number 8, the altar of secrecy. While quietly plotting at home, Ruben is surprisingly interrupted by an emotionally wrecked Teddy seeking to form a truce before their inevitable war takes its course. Over coffee, Teddy searches for answers and ultimately another way to settle things with Ruben without bloodshed. The CIA man offers Ruben one last way out, urging him to essentially go and live his truth and cease meddling in his governmental, i.e. criminal, affairs. Just before departing, he assures Ruben that if not, the next time the two meet will be their last. WTF moment number 7, the easiest promise. Oso meets with Franklin and with his back against the wall, capitulates to handing over Teddy in exchange for a hefty fee. After settling on $1 million asking price, Oso agrees in the interest of his family and their protection under one condition. Franklin must agree to kill Teddy once he's finished with him. This was in fear of possible retaliation by the CIA operative upon discovering it was Oso behind the betrayal. Without hesitation, Franklin agrees to Teddy's doom in their future clash. WTF moment number 6, prize catch. Kane's men finally spot Louie at the ranch and make a violent play to capture her. With shotguns in hand, the two henchmen shoot up the place until apprehending a disarmed Louie, who had just relinquished her weapon prior to riding her horse and clearing her head following the fight with Jerome. Then, Franklin is contacted by Kane and made aware of his auntie's predicament. WTF moment number 5, brand name. Kane attempts to get Buckley's whereabouts from Louie, using several tactics to no avail, including beatings and a sinisterly delivered story about the loss of his lady's trust. Determined to protect her own life by concealing the information, Louie stays mum on Buckley. An equally determined Kane resorts to brutal measures following her protracted refusals, and brands his first initial into Louie's chest with a scorching hot crowbar while Franklin coldly absorbs the grisly sight. Still unwilling to give up the former cop, Kane stoops to even lower levels in order to secure the information, things that I can't even repeat on this channel going forward for monetization purposes. WTF moment number 4, dime dropping. Visibly shaken by the torture display put on by Kane and mustering up one final ounce of love remaining for his family, Franklin contacts Leon and gets word to Jerome by proxy that Louie is behind the 8-ball. Enraged, Jerome pulls up to the spot squad deep, only to be confronted by his once beloved nephew. Rome demands Louie's whereabouts, guns drawn, but his ever-cerebral nephew devises a plan to save Unc's wife and the lives of all involved. Though begrudgingly, this was the first olive branch we've seen extended since the familiar war boiled over to this point, and unfortunately, it will be the last while Jerome still walked the earth. WTF moment number 3, a pimp named Sickback. In the last resort to extract Buckley's whereabouts from Louie, Kane consults with the pimp named Percy. He brings in the deplorable character to essentially ravage Louie and break her for the intel, literally. The evil micro mini-pimp toys with Louie, along with his cohorts, but her unofficial psychological evaluation of the hellbound soul buys her enough time to see him meet his maker by shotgun fire. WTF moment number 2, family invasion. Franklin and his collective infiltrate Kane's fortress clandestinely. Still feigning an alliance, Franklin gains further entry, only to open fire on Louie's would-be assaulters, clipping the lot of them. In arguably the most glorious sequence since the war of Season 4, Franklin, Jerome, and Leon lead a gun-blazing charge against Kane and his men. Though under dire circumstances, it felt damn good to see the old gang back to it under the umbrella of togetherness and a unified front. If only they could have all made it out intact. In WTF moment number 1, Rome has fallen. In his final act of the series, Jerome murders Kane's gross pimp connection and comes face to face with Kane himself, who holds Louie at gunpoint while trying to barter her life for his own. In a reckless rage, Uncle Rome refuses to trade, preferring to take his chances in a shootout over the woman that he loves. Then, the two men tragically thug it out to the death, with Kane immediately dropping following the shots. Jerome, however, stumbles a bit to the cries of his flock, appealing to the game for things to be different. He releases one final tear before falling to his death, all while an inconsolable Franklin reverts back to the young man we met back in Season 1 and cries out for his uncle, Louie emphatically doing the same. Some lingering thoughts before we end today's video. The title of Episode 6 was Concrete Jungle, and it's a metaphor for a large, crime-ridden city where ugliness resides in abundance in the form of evil acts committed by the people. This episode represented the aforementioned fully, highlighted by the depths evil men were willing to go once catching their prey, each of them animalistic in their responses. The Snowfall logo for this episode almost looked to resemble an open wound of sorts, caused by multiple cuts and lacerations. It signaled to the viewer that things were about to get ugly, and that's definitely what happened in the grisly scenes that followed. Louie's apology to Jerome, the half-assed maneuver that it was, did highlight some interesting aspects about her character. During the exchange, we learned the origin of Louie's hunger for more, self-worth, and the journey to achieve it. Louie resented the fact that although she was the brains behind their joint operation, Jerome was inevitably the face of it. This is due in part to his stature physically speaking, but also it is attributed to something that Lou can never change, being a man. Manhood and leadership walk hand in hand on the tightrope of life, at least they should, and people will default and defer to the man in most business scenarios. Big Dion's slight against Louie during the previous episode was Exhibit A of this phenomenon. As much as Louie loved her husband, she could never garner the respect and deference that he commanded simply by existing. And no matter how much she attained through their business exploits, it would never be enough to fill that void in her soul, a void that was fueled by a lifetime of being used, abused, pimped out, and done away with as if she was nothing. The Claudias of the world only served as reminders of who Louie would never be, and her lust for power was a fruitless effort towards fulfilling her own defects in vain. At the end of the day, her power was only maintained through the man in her life, who represented a living, breathing consequence to anyone who would dare cross her. Women in positions of power share this reality. On Raising Kanan, Rock is only as powerful as her brother's reinforcements allow her to be, and in Ghost, Monet is only as powerful as Lorenzo, Kane, and Drew emboldened her to be. Louie is no different, and that's what perpetually tormented her overly ambitious soul. While we're on Louie, Kane branding her was extremely symbolic. For those of you who are well-versed in scripture, you'll recall that following Cain slaying his brother Abel, the Lord put a mark upon him in order to designate him as cursed. Thus, anyone who discovered him would know to spare his life because the mark was an open indicator of shame, a shame that he was mandated to live with for the many days ahead as punishment for the transgression against his blood. In our Snowfall epic, the character Kane, whose name is as ironic as it is downright intentional, places a mark upon Louie prior to Jerome's death. This mark is an indicator to us that Louie will indeed survive Snowfall's final season, but the shame of her actions against her family will be eternally displayed upon her chest, a modern version of the guilt and torment she'll be forced to live with until the end of her days. And lastly, during Franklin and Jerome's troubled reunion, their first since the premiere, you can visibly see the tension between Leon and Scully. Both men have ascended into higher realms of consciousness since the chaos of the gang wars of Season 4, but there's still very much bad blood between the two men on account of what Lee took from Scully when he pulled that trigger on that car so long ago. The hints dropped in this episode aren't by coincidence, and if Lee doesn't survive, it'll be due to Scully completing his revenge against him, assuming he's still in that frame of mind. Remember, it was Scully employing Louie and Jerome in the beginning, to mend the fences with their family, subtly implying that he knew the pain that accompanied the consequences of refusing to do so. We shall see indeed. And that'll do it for this one. What were your thoughts on Snowfall's 6th episode? Be sure to drop me your opinions in the comments below. As always, I thank you for watching today's video. If you liked today's video, go ahead and drop $1 on that Cash App for us, hit the like button, share it with your friends who are fans of Snowfall, and subscribe for more content such as this. This is Rudy P. Magic of Rudy P. Magic Beats, and have a blessed one until the next one. Peace, y'all.